would be helpful.
Yes, the recording has started.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, welcome everybody. Apologies for the slight delay. And just to confirm that this meeting here today on the 9th of June is going to be recorded via Teams. Okay, note that the recording will be available from the website shortly after this meeting, but the recording remains the copyright of the Broadsea Authority and the minutes remain the formal record of the meeting. If anybody wishes to film or record the proceedings, just could they say so that those present are aware of that. Okay, that's fine. Have a couple of apologies. Matthew Bradbury and Greg Munford and Simon Sparrow are unable to make the meeting and have sent their apologies. Just to note that Leslie is in on the meeting, but his video link is not working, so I will ask at the end of all the different agenda items whether he's got anything he'd like to contribute. Okay, so if everybody could state their name and declare any interests only in relation to the items on the agenda. And if I kick off, that would be great. And then Alan, if you're next, I'll shout out everybody's name as per the list that I've got in front of me. So my name, it's Nikki Talbot, no interest to declare. Alan.
My name is Alan Thompson, no interest to declare.
Harry.
Hello, my name's Harry Blathwaite, no interest to declare.
Leslie.
My name's Leslie Mogford, I have no interest to declare.
Linda.
Linda Asplund, no interest to declare.
Mike.
Mike Barnes, no interest to declare.
Paul.
I can get myself off mute then. Paul Thomas, no interest to declare.
And I think lastly, Stephen Bolt.
Stephen Bolt, no interest to declare.
Okay, is there anybody I've missed out who needs to introduce themselves? I don't think so. Great, thank you. To note whether any items have been proposed as matters of urgent business, agenda item number 3, and none have been received. Public question time. Note whether any questions have been raised by members of the public. Item 4, and none have been received. Item 5, to receive and confirm the minutes of the Navigation Committee meeting held on the 14th of April 2022. Just to double check if any members have any objections to the minutes, and if none, I shall confirm the minutes as a correct record to be signed. So if you've got any objections, please put your hand up. If I don't see anybody's hands up, then I'll assume. Nope, can't see any, so that's great. So I'll confirm that the minutes are correct and please to be signed accordingly on today's date, the 9th of June. So moving swiftly on to agenda item number 6, summary of actions and outstanding issues following discussions at previous meetings. So I think John's going to run through those, and if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask him, please pop your hand up and off we go. I'd personally like to just thank everybody for having done a great job on getting Borough Castle up and running in time for the season this year. I think that's a vital bit of mooring that with the Broadsea Authority have done well in negotiating and refurbishing. So John, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that last point, because yes, you're absolutely right. That mooring is a key location in terms of boats transiting Braden Water. There are 4 items in the summary of actions and outstanding issues. All of the information is up to date. There's nothing that's happened since but Rob Rogers and I in particular will do our best to answer any questions that members have on those 4 items.
Anybody got any questions? No? I just asked a question about Carrow Bridge, which I think Rob said, if you could confirm the current situation with respect to them just doing their sort of resurfacing, which potentially will happen in, did you say, around sometime during the autumn?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the Carrow Bridge. So the latest information from Norfolk County Council is that they're not now going ahead with their major resurfacing, which would see that bridge sealed shut. But they do still need to do some work on that bridge deck to repair the road surface, and we have not yet seen what that plan is. So we have no timescale for that, I'm afraid.
Okay, thanks for just giving the update. So moving swiftly to item 7, John's executive report and any current issues. So again, any questions, John will be happy to answer those.
Thank you, Chair. There are a couple of things I think it'd be useful if I just took members through the safety issue, because that's obviously a significant and important one. So members will recall at the last meeting of this committee, there was agreement that we should be recommending that to the authority that British Marine's quality accredited boatyard scheme be incorporated into our hire boat licensing conditions. Following the meeting of this committee, the Marine Accident Investigation Branch published its report into the Diamond Emblem accident, and you'll see on page 19 the recommendations that were included in that report, which included a recommendation that was very similar to that made by this committee. And at the Broads Authority meeting on the 13th of May, that recommendation was adopted. Since then, we have written to all the hire boat yards, alerting them to the requirement. We've had very little response as yet, but we've also been in discussion with British Marine about them providing support to hire boat yards in terms of training and advice about what would be required. You'll see in paragraph 1.6, there's a reference to the fact that I had 30 days in which to reply to these recommendations from the MIIB. We met that requirement. That's gone off. And there was a particular issue that was raised at the Broads Authority about the retention of the RCD information. So we've looked at that, and I thought you'd appreciate me reading out the precise words that we sent back to the MAIB. So the recommendation was that the authority should retain a copy of the declarations of conformity and other associated information demonstrating compliance with the requirements of the Recreational Craft Directive for all boats operating in their waters. So that was a recommendation. The response that we sent is as follows. An RCD issued to a new fully constructed vessel is accepted as evidence that it complies with the construction and equipment standards as per section 12 of the Broads Authority Act 2009. After 4 years, the vessel has to be retested to ensure it is still compliant. The Broads Authority will retain the RCD certificates from the manufacturers for a period of 7 years, as per the Broads Authority's data retention policy. Please note, manufacturers are legally required to retain the RCDs for 10 years. After 4 years, and in accordance with the Broads Authority Act 2009, any hire vessel operating on the Broads Authority's waterways will require a boat safety scheme BSS certificate. So that's the response that's gone back. I haven't had any further correspondence from the MLAB, but if I get any, of course, I'll let you know. The other thing that I thought was worth alerting and raising with the committee was in relation to Appendix 4 and prosecutions. Because we issued a press statement about our prosecutions, which attracted quite a lot of interest. And as a result, I did a radio interview. You'll see the first part of Appendix 4 deals with the prosecutions since April 2022 for failure to pay a toll, and they're listed. But it was Appendix 5 that attracted the press interest, which was about prosecutions for navigation offences. And you'll see that was since the 2nd of February 2021, and there are 13 of them. So in effect, that's 2 years worth, because the prosecutions, the way it works is that it takes some time for them to work through the system. What I'd want to emphasise is if you look at the number of prosecutions, they're tiny compared to the number of boats on the Broads. So there are something like 12,000 boats. And the fact that over 2 years we prosecuted 13 owners emphasises that these are for the most serious offences where they're endangering other craft. And similarly with the tolls prosecutions, we try and resolve those as far as possible without having to resort to court. So again, you've got a relatively short list. In the Radio Norfolk interview, I was rather pleased that when they went and interviewed hirers at Wroxham, actually the response that hirers gave in terms of behaviour by other people on the water was, I thought, rather good, in terms of they said how considerate most boat owners were and how they didn't find there were any problems. And I think it's worth emphasising that the majority of people who use the waterways do it with a great deal of care and caution and take due notice of other people on the waterways. So although this list of prosecutions for other offences looks serious, there are a relatively small number of serious incidents on the Broads. So I thought it was worth drawing that out and also highlighting where we are in terms of the MAIB report and the implementation of the decision by the Broads Authority regarding our hire boat licensing conditions. But if members have got any questions about any of those matters or the other attachments, again, the team will do our best to answer them.
Okay, thank you, John. I just wanted you to clarify something, and then Mike, you've got your hand up. So could you just clarify when the compliance for that new requirement will be for all hire boat operators?
So that's from the 1st of April 2023, so it's next year. So there's the best part of a year, and British Marine, as I've indicated, has been really helpful in terms of undertaking to engage with members and non-members of British Marine to alert them and support them in meeting those requirements.
Okay, thanks for that, John. Mike, yeah, don't forget, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that report, John. In terms of the accredited boatyard scheme, does that apply to those yards offering sailing boats for hire and also canoes and or paddle boards?
Rob, can you cover that, please?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Mike. The QAB is only for hire boat operators, so that does include sailing vessels now under the new hire boat code, but it currently doesn't include the small independents who just operate stand-up paddle boards or canoes. Although at the last committee, we have the full authority. We did talk about this, and there is a piece of work now being undertaken to look at anybody who hires any kind of craft on the Broads. We're looking to bring them into our licensing scheme. So that's a piece of work that we're progressing this year. But it's worth noting for the committee that when we set up the hire boat licensing and the operators licensing, at that time, there weren't that many, and in fact, most of the canoe operators were already within a yard. but it's a proliferation of these small hires now that we've seen in the last few years, which has now caused us to have a rethink. So that the ambition is to bring all hires, powered, sailing and paddle, into a licensing scheme.
Excellent, thanks, Rob. I wasn't looking to point fingers or blame or anything.
No, a valid question, but thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for covering that off, Rob. Leslie, are you okay with all that?
Yeah, I'm okay with all that. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So if there are no more questions on that particular agenda item, we'll move on to agenda item 8, which is for Dan to present, which is on the Construction, Maintenance and Ecology Work Programme. And hopefully everybody got the copy of the maps, which I thought was quite interesting, of Alton Broad, showing the work that's been being done there, just for comparative purposes. So Dan?
Thank you, Chair. So the report contents items 1 to 6 are as tabled, and this is an exciting part of the year for the committee cycle for myself, because I get to report on all of the previous year's completed dredging figures and project costs. So all of 2021 to 22 work is summarised in Appendix 1. So that's all the projects in that period. And then we also present in Appendix 3 the annual dredging plan for this coming year, so the one we're in 2022 to 23. So Chair alluded to the maps of Alton Broad, so I don't know whether it's useful for me to show those on screen. I can do that, so I shall. Just to walk you through it slightly, because out of context they don't always make sense. If I just press the right buttons here, I can get them on screen for you all. So you should be able to see now a map of Alton Broad, lots of nice colours on, and this was the hydrographic survey prior to dredging for the 21-22 season. So this is the winter of, say, December, January 2020. So if I just walk you through what these hydrographic maps actually show, the way we're presenting the colours is that the bright light blue is where we are reaching the waterways specification. So we're saying we will maintain a particular depth in a particular stretch of the waterway. And that light blue colour shows that we're doing that. So for Alton Broad, you can see here, so the red areas is where there's least compliance. So this is where the shallowest water is, grading down through yellow to the light blue. So there's big chunks of the body of the Broad that aren't meeting the set waterway specification. Make that work. So if we jump forward a year, so this is after the dredging in 2021-22, the area of light blue has increased significantly. So we focused the dredging work along this, what we've sort of dubbed the North Channel, the north side of Broad. This is typically where the rangers push vessels during the motorboating events. So this sort of channel gets used fairly close to the edge and is where vessels are directed during those events. But you can still see that there's a long way to go in Alton Broad. So we've got several years of dredging planned in Alton, but you can see that difference that 1 year's worth of effort makes. There's 10,000 cubic metres removed from Alton. That area of the Broad now meeting that waterway specification is much increased. Then moving forward, what the Rivers Engineer has then done is looking at this map now, is to plan out the dredging for this coming year. So for 22-23, the guys on site are now dredging here again this year, and the team are going to focus on these areas to deliver the most benefits for users on site, whilst generating, gaining that material to place in at Vito's Marsh and complete that project. So you can see how we use the mapping, the hydrographics to give us evidence on the progress, and then also then as a forward planning tool so that we're dredging from the highest priority areas. So that was just a little detailed glimpse into the working practices using Alton as that example. I think I've unshared my screen now, and I'm happy to take any questions on the contents of the report.
Could I ask, are those maps available for other Broads or other areas of dredging? I know the hydrographic surveys are done fairly often, but
Yes, so yeah, that was a sneak preview. All of the updated hydrographic maps are published annually on the Broads Authority's navigation notes and water depth web pages. So they're in sort of static PDFs showing similar contoured water depths, which is part of our duty of the Port Marine Safety Code. So they're the depth charts, basically.
Yeah.
So
if anybody wishes to sort of ask about them, that's where that information is located.
That's where we
That's
direct.
useful
Correct.
to know. Okay. And what sort of proportion of time is spent then at Alton Broad relative to other sites? Or once it's done, is that it for quite some time, or?
Yes, one hopes so. The project plan for Alton is to do the priority dredging, whether we'll hit all of that in the capacity we have available at Peto's Marsh. You know, there'll be some left, shall we say, but the programme at Peto's to dispose of and recreate that reed bed area will take, you know, it's tens of thousands. So we've got another 2 years of dredging at least to complete that. That will meet most of the waterway specification in Alton Broad.
Okay, thank you. Has anybody else got any other questions? I again was pleased if you've got any further information about the signage improvement, just to share with people.
So is this relating to item 5 at St Olives? Okay, yeah. So the Rangers had identified a bit of a review was needed in that area. So particularly with advanced warning for bridge heights and then actual guidance through the bridge structures in terms of where vessels should be positioned in the channel. So yeah, there's a whole range of new additions going in there. Some is already installed, renewed gauge boards where they've got worn and less visible. So that's involved contractors and our own maintenance team doing all that. So it's all on track and should be completed by the end of July.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Rob, I think you've got your hand up. Thanks.
It's probably just worth noting for Navigation's committee's sake that if you actually look at the work completed in 21 into 22, we are operating under extremely difficult conditions, maintaining staff through a COVID, and we did prioritise the dredging sites and the workload. So the delivery on network has been maintained. So I'd just like to thank Dan and his team for actually maintaining that priority. It showed that good COVID practice was used because we were able to isolate the teams where necessary, work in bubbles, and actually get them to their jobs and keep them working throughout a pandemic. So just on from my behalf, thank you to Dan and the construction team for their efforts.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll all endorse that. Thank you. Okay, so any other questions? Leslie, okay?
Yes, okay. I'm so glad we're dredging the place where I always run aground on Alton.
Okay. So moving on to item number 9 then, the navigation income and expenditure, 1st of April to February 2022, actual and 2021-22 forecast outrun. Emma, I think if you introduce it and your new colleague, then any further questions we've got, we'll ask at the end.
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, I'd just like to introduce Ellie Richards. She's our new senior accountant, so she started This is her third week, so this is her first committee, and Ellie's doing some sterling work for me on the statement of accounts. So, which is what this report is the basis for the statement of accounts. So this is the annual report that covers expenditure up to the 31st of March. I'm pleased to report we haven't picked up any further changes since the report was produced. So the COVID regulations have amended when we have to publish the draft statement of accounts. And this is currently the 31st of July, so we're on good track for that to happen. We've got training penciled in for members on the statement of accounts for the 20th of July, so we'll be sending invites out to that shortly. Just to give you a quick update on where we are roughly with income for the start of the new financial year 22-23. So at the end of May, private craft toll income is broadly on target. It does make comparisons with the 20 and 21 data quite difficult because obviously the impact of COVID meant our sort of patterns of receipt were a bit all over the place, but we're hoping this is going to be a bit clearer where our forecast position will be from June onwards. Highcraft tolls is currently showing £17,666 behind the forecast. And then one other piece of news I have for you, the unions have just started to put forward their negotiations on behalf of staff for pay for the 22-23 pay negotiations. The unions are proposing that either a minimum of £2,000 to each employee or RPI, whichever is higher. So RPI is currently at 11.1%. You may recall that when the budget was set, we made an allowance for 2%. So I know members may be concerned that there's a bit of a difference between the two, but just as a reminder that the union's opening proposal for 21-22 was 10%, and staff eventually received 1.75% in March. So it's quite a long drawn out process, but I'll report back when we've got more information. Don't know if anybody's got any questions for me.
Any questions, anybody? No. Okay, well, that's all going well. I think obviously we'll keep an eye on what incomes come in over the season, and hopefully we'll be on par with what we've received before. So that's great. Okay, I think moving on to agenda item 10, the draft Broads Plan consultation. Is Maria Conti presenting that, or?
Maria's not here, but
no,
I'll introduce it, Chair.
And what about Natalie for the next one? Is she?
Natalie is here going to do the local plan. I think, okay, yes, so there she is. Hi, Natalie.
Okay, right. Could you sort of just clarify the difference between agenda item number 10 and 11, just for clarity for everybody's transparency purposes?
Oh, fine. Yeah. So the Broads plan is the management plan for the Broads that we're required to review every 5 years by the Act. It's not a plan for the Broads Authority per se, it's a plan for the Broads. So one of the key things that I think members will know we've been working on for a number of years is to try and engage with all our partners who are also deliverers of the Broads plan. We held two, and then the other one is the local plan, which I'm sure Natalie will give a better explanation of. But the local plan is specifically around the authority's planning function and sets the policies and guides development in the Broads. So it's a rather more specific beast. There is a bit of a relationship, but they are effectively doing two different jobs. So looking at the first one, the Broads plan, I think members will recall we had two workshops, one in September last year and one in January, when members saw early drafts of the plan. And at the last Broads Authority, it was agreed it was ready to go out for consultation. So it is now out for public consultation, and that period lasts until the 15th of July. So this is the our formal consultation, if you like, with the Navigation Committee. But there is an opportunity for you as individuals or organisations to respond to the consultation up until the 15th of July, when we'll then examine all the comments we've received and look at what, if any, amendments need to be made to the draft plan. So I think my role at this point is to listen to any comments that members have got, and then we'll take those away and examine them with all the other responses that we receive. So we're here to listen to any comments members have got on the draft plan. Back to you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, John. So has anybody got any questions or observations on this particular plan document, which is still in its draft format?
Stephen.
Stephen?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's just I'm conscious of a lot of press at the moment on national parks and rewilding, and I just I'm firmly of the belief, and I think I've said this before, that it's not appropriate to try and rewild the Broads. They're not wild in the first place, they're man-made. But I just wondered if we shouldn't be at least referencing what we are doing. We're referencing everything we're doing in conservation, but I just wondered if we should be mentioning perhaps why rewilding in the Broads is not necessarily appropriate, other than in perhaps some very small areas, etc. It's just because that seems to be in the press an awful lot, and specifically to do with national parks.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. You're right. I mean, there are several things you raise in my mind. One is, of course, the Broads is very different from the other national parks, as we all know. And in terms of the issues around nature conservation, I think the nature conservation bodies see that there's a bigger piece of work to be done in some of the upland national parks, where there is a greater opportunity for rewilding. In terms of the Broads, there are some sites that have been identified by landowners. So I'm thinking particularly of the Summer Leighton estate, where the estate is looking at how it might manage some of its land in different ways. So whereas for most of the Broads, I think you're absolutely right, but it's that actually what we're trying to do is manage the Broads to retain and enhance its existing biodiversity. There are some exceptions, like the Summer Leighton estate, but I'll have a look and see whether a reference to that could be included. I mean, the difficulty with all these documents is the world is moving so fast that constantly trying to catch the latest thoughts is difficult. What we've tried to do in the document is keep it at a level such that it will, last its lifespan of 5 years. But thank you for the comment, Stephen.
Okay, thanks.
Paul, would you like to make a comment?
Yeah, sure, thank you. I've only actually skimmed through it, so I haven't really sort of read it in any detail. But I think the one thing that I was wondering about, what struck me, was about how sustainable is the plan, especially in terms of affordability and access to resources. Now, I'm kind of thinking that, especially on the access to resources, because to kind of maintain a lot of that, will require resources, require people. And I was kind of wondering whether, is that, looking forward to the future, is that, a concern or something that actually needs to be considered in terms of, the feasibility of the plan?
Yeah, again, a really good point, Paul. The difficulty, I think, in any form of planning at the moment is the degree of uncertainty going forward is so high that it's very difficult to know what resource might be available. At a practical level, if you think about the two streams of resources, in terms of National Park grant, that's likely to be fixed at a cash level for the next 3 years. So with inflation running close to 10 or 11%, that has significant worries for us. But on the other hand, there are some indications that DEFRA may be willing to provide some additional funding for specific targeted areas of work. So if you think about the recent money we've had for the Peat Discovery Grant, which is close on the 800,000, you know, there may well be opportunities for us to deliver some of the key priorities in the document, because the document very much follows some of the national priorities of the government. So I would hope that they would recognise the value of some of those areas of work. In terms of our other main income stream from toll payers, as I've mentioned before, this year we seem to be broadly on track. Whereas I was a little concerned that we'd lost 65 hire boats and we're about £37,000 adrift. As Emma mentioned earlier, that gap has narrowed and is more like 17,000 now. On private boat income, we'll know more in a couple of months, but at the moment it looks broadly on track as well. But in terms of navigation responsibilities, again, I think the big worry is inflation, which is hitting things like steel and wood and aggregate and fuel in a big way. So I think the plan tries to strike the balance. It tries to still be a bit ambitious, about what we might be able to achieve in 5 years. But I think there is also a touch of realism about it in terms of the level of uncertainty and costs. So you're right to raise all of that. And come October, I think the annual briefing that we do on the budget on the tolls with all members will be a crucial meeting for us to look at what has happened to inflation by then, what's happened to our lines of income, and what does it mean for the following financial year. So yeah, thanks for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. For me personally, I don't know whether it's this plan or the next one, but it was mentions of increased access for people with some form or another of disability. There didn't seem to be enough within it, again, like having skim read it, to explain what may be done to enhance that for those who are less able to leap in and out of a boat or walk around the Broads or access places and enjoy the landscape. So I don't know if there should be a separate section for that or just mentioned somewhere.
Again, we can have a look at that, Chair. I mean, there are some specific provisions that, I mean, you're talking about getting in and out of a boat. I recall, organisations like Waveney Sailability that do a great job at Alton Broad in terms of people with disabilities, and they have some specific provision which allows people to easily get in the boat. Similarly, with the Nancy Oldfield Trust, does a great job. I think there may be a broader issue which maybe you and I could take up with the Hire Boat Federation, which is about what level of provision do the hire boat industry make for disabled people? Because my perception is that is, I'm not convinced there is a great deal, but I suggest you and I take that up with our next meeting with the Hire Boat Federation to ask them about it.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Okay, if there are no more questions for John, we'll move on to Natalie then for the local plan issues and options, item number 11. Hello, Natalie.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. So yes, I'm Natalie. I'm the Planning Policy Officer, and one of my jobs is producing the local plan. So as John alluded to, the local plan contains land allocations for certain development and policies that help guide decisions on development proposals. These policies are used by development management officers when they consider planning applications. So the local plan tends to contain policies on subjects like housing numbers, energy, water, climate change, affordable housing, open space, topics like that really. So the process for producing a local plan and the general content of a local plan tends to be guided by national policy, national guidance and various acts. So it's quite regulated and there are certain steps and certain things we need to do. So we are reviewing our current local plan and that was adopted in 2019. And we're reviewing it because 2019's a little while ago, a lot has changed probably in terms of how we think about climate change and biodiversity, for example. And also it was produced and examined under old government policy. So it's prudent to update it and keep it current. But it's important to note that our current policies are still in place at the minute. There's nothing wrong with them. We still have an adopted local plan, which will be used for any planning applications. In fact, as we progress the local plan, the policies we have at the minute will probably be rolled forward into the new one. There might be some slight amendments or updates, but the local plan is good and in place. So over the last year or so, I've been taking small chunks of the issues and options to planning committee for them to discuss. And they've provided some comments. Now, this document is called the issues and options. It's the first round of public consultation and engagement on producing a new local plan. It doesn't contain policies at the minute, but it raises some issues, some topic areas. It talks about some potential options and asks a few questions. It's quite an open consultation, really. Some of the topics in the document that you've been sent, again, you know, are similar to what we talk about now, but looking about whether we need to change our stance. They relate to climate change and water. We also ask what people think of our current policies, if they've got any comments on the policies that are adopted at the minute. We'll also be undertaking a call for sites, and this covers a few things. So for residential dwellings across the whole of the Broads, and also for residential moorings across the whole of the Broads. And then in Great Yarmouth Borough only, we'll be doing a call for sites for gypsy and traveller sites and residential caravans, because our evidence says that we have a need for that area. In fact, I can tell you that that our studies are giving an idea of the housing numbers being about 17 a year, and a gypsy and travelling need of around 10, and the residential caravans of around 12. But that information and the studies are going to planning committee at the end of June. The residential mooring study is still awaited, so we will hopefully get that in the next few weeks. Now, of particular interest to the navigation committee is probably the key heading in front of key heading section of the issues and options. Now, it's important to note that this section was drafted with the help of Lucy Birchnell and Dan Hoare, so I've had their help. And the issue is that essentially over time, by placing key heading in front of key heading, you're reducing the width of the waterway gradually. So the section asks what we should do, with the options ranging from setting requirements broad wide, or an area specific approach, or actually don't do anything. So you may have some thoughts about that. Now, the consultation on the issues and options will probably start around the end of July, start of August, and will go for around 10 weeks. We aim to hold some drop-in events in the north, centre and south of the Broads. And actually, there's a design guide that's going to be produced, and that's likely to be consulted at the same time. So we'll work together, and those drop-in events will cover that as well. So that's basically a rundown of the issues and options. I wonder if you have any questions.
Has anybody got any questions or observations to make? I think from a navigation point of view, as you say, item number or section number 20, the key heading in front of the key heading is an area that perhaps will be up for debate, stroke clarity really on how many times is a person allowed to, I won't say encroach, but sort of use that to enhance and remove their key heading, and whether or not you at some stage say, well, you can only do it once, or whether there will be number of times that will be limited. So I think from our point of view, Navigation Committee, that's something that will need potential clarification. I can see that Mike has got his hand up. So Mike, if you wish to ask a question, go ahead.
Yes, it's actually a point, Natalie. Although you mention them further on in the document, on section 7.6 on the economy, you don't actually mention anything about reed and sedge cutting in terms of the local businesses. And I just think that as you refer to them later, it'd be quite good if they went into the economy section as well.
Yeah, okay with that,
Thanks, I've
Natalie?
noted that down and I'll look to weave that in.
That's on page 71 of the agenda papers, if anyone wants to refer to it.
Okay. Rob?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm glad you raised a bit about piling in front of piling. It's a situation that comes up quite a lot, and it has come up a lot more recently. And if you think of places like Wroxham, where you've got quite hard edge, it doesn't take for too many landowners to start piling in front of the piling. And the reason they pile in front of the piling is actually to remove piling and take out all the tie rods is actually quite expensive. It's much easier just to pile in front and then cut through and redo it again. We're having quite a battle to stop some of this development, because actually the section of piles, you know, we're not talking small sections. If they're using the large ones, you're talking 500 mil to nearly half a metre, over half a metre each time. Some of those river sections can't withstand that kind of encroachment, and we're ending up with real pinch points. So I'd hope Navigation Committee would have some good views on how we want to deal with that in the future.
Thank you, Rob. I'm sure that that can be debated maybe at a later date, maybe a special agenda item or a review in some way or another, just to see if there are, not wishing to highlight any particular people, but if there are pinch points that could occur if people choose to do the double piling, so to speak. That would be a useful thing to look at, that we can then as a group advise on and also make it aware to the public as to what sort of areas there might be that issue occurring. I'll let Harry have a go and then come back to you, Mike. Harry?
I'd just like to support that. I think it should be a separate agenda item.
Yeah.
And I think it would be useful to have actual explicit examples of where this has occurred, so we can actually see the effect and discuss what we can do about this. I think this is a problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike?
Yeah, I'm guessing that by narrowing the river in this way, it increases the risk of flooding as well. I appreciate the navigational issues, but I'm not an expert on flooding, so and flood risk.
Okay. Natalie? Want to come back to us on any of
It's
those?
just to say that as and when the consultation ends and we get the comments on various aspects, including that key heading in front of key heading, then yes, I'm happy to come back and, you know, present those comments and see what everyone thinks, and we can formulate a section if indeed that is how we want to proceed. So yes, I'm happy to come back and do that.
Okay, so that would be when? end of sort of October meeting?
I wouldn't like to. I don't know how many comments I'm going to get, so I don't
Okay.
want to. I don't want to commit to a date. I just have to say
No.
a future meeting, because we could get hundreds and hundreds of comments and about various things, and it could take me ages to go through. So all I can say is I'll come back at some point in the future.
Okay, all right, I appreciate that. Okay. For me personally as well, I didn't really see much mention of solar panel development as one of the energy sources. I noticed there was a whole section about wind turbines, but not particularly about solar panels.
So we already have a policy on renewable energy, and actually the hierarchy is to reduce energy consumption in the first place, and then have energy efficient goods, and then after that look at renewable low carbon energy. So that kind of stance will probably be taken forward. In terms of large scale solar farms, we have that assessed in our landscape sensitivity study, which is referred to again in the renewable energy section. So it's important to note that just because an issue isn't raised in this issue as an option, it doesn't mean it can never be raised before. So people can obviously say what they want to say, but rest assured that actually solar panels and solar farms are addressed already in the local plan, and we're probably going to roll forward that policy approach. Wind is talked about specifically because there's a specific national direction on what to do with wind, and that is that if a local plan does not identify suitable areas, then onshore wind cannot happen in that area, basically. So that's why we've raised specifically the wind energy issue, because we're asking whether we need to change that stance in the Broads or not. But yeah, rest assured, all types of renewable energy are already covered, and we'll see what people say, but we'll probably roll forward that policy quite similar to what it is now.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Natalie. Great. Okay. If there's no further questions, then moving to agenda item number 12, I don't think there are any other matters. So just please note then the date of the next meeting, which will be Thursday, the 1st of September at 10 o'clock. And I'd like to say that we will be using Teams again for that, but there's obviously a few issues after today's meeting that perhaps you can help us reassure us that we won't have to hang about for quite so long, but we'd anticipate that being done remotely, but definitely to have the October meeting where we're discussing the tolls as a face-to-face meeting. So just to clarify then, that we're going to exclude the members of the public. We're asked to consider exclusion of the public from the meeting under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972 for the consideration of an item below on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined by paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A to the Act as amended by the Local Government Access to Information Variation Order 2006, and that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public benefit in disclosing the information. I have to ask for a proposer and seconder for that. So who would like to propose? Harry? And anybody would like to second it? I'm sorry, I can't see everybody. Mike Barnes? Yep, that's lovely. Any members object? No? Okay. Governance officer counts the votes and announces the results. So Sarah, could you just confirm that?
Yeah, unless we want to agree by consensus, as you said, unless anybody has an objection, I take it that the whole committee is in agreement with that proposal. Yes, I'm not seeing any objection, so that's carried.
Okay, so at this stage, it says to ask members of the public press leave, but if, at this stage is it appropriate now to stop the recording?
That's right.
Yeah.
So